Today, I have the pleasure of bringing on my buddy Stan the Credit Frog to talk about his unique credit card setup composed of some underrated cards that a lot more of us should probably consider. And as y'all know, I really prefer to make reviews on credit cards based on personal experience where I can. And in this case, there's no better way to do that than bring on the man who has the cards himself. And with that being said, Stan, welcome back to the channel.
Thanks so much, Spencer, for having me. It's always great to join you on your channel, and I can't wait to answer some of these questions for you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, as I mentioned in the intro here, I just think that it's so cool that you use a setup that, I don't personally have. You use a setup that not a lot of people have in general. And I want to get, the first person perspective on how you use these credit cards and whether or not maybe some of us should consider getting them too. So just diving straight into it, without getting too far into the weeds though, can you just explain your overall credit card setup right now, like what's in your wallet and how you kind of think about using your points and stuff like that?
Yeah, sure. So I can definitely answer that. So my wallet right now is something that I have created over the course of the past year or so. And so it really all started with that US Bank Altitude Reserve. Before that, I was really dabbling in a lot of points earning cards, miles earning cards, but I didn't really think about cashback until I got that specific card. And I got it back in October of 2023, I believe. And I just had to use it for 1 month and then review my statement. And when I looked at it, it really surprised me that almost the entirety of that statement was almost everything that I purchased that month. And it really taught me that, wow, I actually use mobile wallets to a great degree. And I can get this really solid, easy 4.5% cashback equivalent for all of those purchases. And that to me was amazing because around that time, a lot of the cards were starting to get new statement credits, more statement credits, increasing annual fees. And I was starting to get bogged down by a lot of those because, I only use that card for spending, but I have a bunch of other cards as well to use for the benefits, things like hotel credit cards or other point earning cards as well. And so for that reason, that was kind of the mainstay. And then, of course, I'm a big fan of Bank of America. So I do use that customized cash rewards card. As a Platinum Honors member, I do get that 5.25% on that choice category, up to $2,500 per quarter. And so because my wife and I both have one of those cards, we can actually now use two of them. So I have one for online shopping, which is a great category to have, as well as one for gas, which I think is another awesome card to use for that purpose. Then it comes back down to the catch-all card after that. And so what's really nice is that new US Bank Smartly card came out recently, offering that 4% cashback if you have, over $100,000 in assets with US Bank. And since I am fortunate to have that sort of asset requirement met, I can also take advantage of that too. So now I have basically a baseline of 4% cashback for all of my purchases. And that's been really serving me well so far. And I'm really excited to see how it goes for me as we move forward in 2025.
Yeah, that's great. So US Bank is a lender, that not really many people talk about. And I'm kind of curious how you even, stumbled into them in the first place. I think a lot of people would be curious to know, what just got you started with them? Because a lot of times on YouTube and elsewhere, you're going to see, the big transferable currency type of banks being talked about, those being the Chase, Amex, Capital One City. And their cards are, pretty objectively good as well. Their ecosystems are great. But what turned you on to US Bank and even Bank of America compared to these other banks?
Well, I've had Bank of America for a long time, and I really like their preferred rewards program, how they really incentivize you to have assets with them. So you really want to save your money, generally speaking, into a Merrill Edge brokerage so you can really build up those assets. And I think that's a really good win-win thing for you. You save money. They give you better credit card rewards. And I also like how simple it was too. There wasn't anything fancy, nothing I really need to do that was outlandish or spend certain things per month. I could just get that nice cash back and kind of go on with my day. And so the reason why I went to US Bank was I've heard about the Altitude Reserve card, from creators like, for example, Dugras Reports. So he actually turned me on to that card as well when I watched his videos. But I said, well, I should just try it out and see how I like it. And so I applied for it, I got it. And that's what I really started to realize that, well, maybe the simplicity is really more important to me than I thought it was, because I used to do a lot of points earning cards like with American Express and they have great cards, don't get me wrong, but I was also in the middle of an identity crisis at that time, right? I was
Right.
figuring out wow, there's so many statement credits and I'm getting really burned out by all of them, even though I can do it. And it gets me net positive value, do I really want to spend my time doing that? And some people, I think it's fine. They have no problem with it, but I was really getting burnt out. And so I thought that was a great solution to that problem, was that US Bank Altitude Reserve, because of that simplicity that offered in a single card. And another point that's really cool to think about is, if you have a simple card, it actually makes it easier for your player two or your spouse or whoever you're working with to use that card easily if they're not someone that is also into credit cards as much as you and I are, for example.
Right.
It's really easy for us to be like, well, use a Chase Sapphire Preferred for this, Chase Freedom Flex for this, Chase Freedom Limited for this. But it's for us, it's like, breathing air. But for a lot of other people, it may not be that same way. And having just one card for everything really makes that a whole lot easier in terms of a system for your player too.
Yep, exactly. So would you say that that's a type of strategy that you could see the majority of credit card users like maybe should be taking more so than we are now? I do wonder that because a lot of our audience, or maybe not our audience, but just general credit card users really don't have a need for more than a couple of credit cards in their setup. So I guess if you were to take, the US Bank setup that you even have, like with the US Bank Altitude Reserve on top of the Smartly credit card, if you just had those two cards compared to, say like an Amex Duo or something like that, is that something you kind of recommend the majority of card users use, or how do you kind of think about that?
Well, it all comes down to what is your goal with using credit cards. I think that's really important to start out with first, because if you know where you want to go, you'll have a path to get there. And so when you look at my setup, it's very clear that the only where you're going to go is getting cash back. Now, it's very easy. There's not too much work to it as compared to the points earning cards, but you're not going to fly in first class on a $10,000, first class seat with my setup. It's just not going to happen. Having said that, there's also some other things that to think about too, is that when you look at the fastest way to earn those points and miles, you're really looking at those welcome offers. And so from my perspective, and I always swear by this, and there are people that disagree with me with this mindset, is that I think you should always have a core credit card setup. And let's define what that is. A core credit card setup is where you actually have a setup where you use it just for spending. It's basically the spending cards you focus on with multipliers. If you don't have one of those, you can certainly do welcome offers over and over and over again. But I would argue that at some point, you will find yourself in a situation where you're not working on a welcome offer at that time. So what do you fall back on? If you don't have a solid core credit card setup, then you may be missing out on some of those spending that you may be doing. So I think it depends on what your goals are. If you want to go and fly, for a discounted rate, or fly international first class, business class, get a lot of good hotel, credit cards for upgrades and free night rewards, then this is not the right setup for you. But if you're looking for a simple, no frills, cashback setup that's pretty simple to understand and you get a lot of value back, I definitely recommend that setup for you.
Gotcha. I think another interesting thing about your setup in particular is that you have, this is also something that you kind of put me onto a while ago, and something I talk about in my videos a lot, is what you just described, that core credit card setup versus a benefits style, setup. You obviously have both of them, and I don't know exactly what you would consider yourself, either being on Team Cashback or Team Travel now, because most of your spend is going towards Team Cashback, but you're not shying away from using hotel cards to get plenty of value there, as well as like the Southwest Companion Pass and stuff. So do you kind of keep those two camps completely separate, or I guess what team do you kind of consider yourself on these days?
I always say that I'm part of a hybrid setup. I do a little bit of cashback, I do a little bit of travel, and you can use them together to create something that's more unified. So for spending, it is very clear I am very cashback focused on that. Now, I say that, but there are some cards that I do use point earning cards specifically for their elevated multipliers, and they don't earn cashback, for example. And I say that in the sense that you could earn cashback, but you shouldn't use them for cashback. So for example, the Amex Platinum, I'd still get 5x on flights, 5x on FHR hotels for those spending. For my hotel stays, I use the Chasing Preferred for Marriott. I use the IHG card for IHG. I use my Hilton card for Hilton. I don't necessarily spend everything in that core credit card setup. I do space them out depending on the multiplier. So I would say that I'm more of a hybrid person. I use a little bit of cashback, a little bit of travel, but because I have a core setup, like you mentioned, and a benefit setup, I can use them together to get the best outcome for my own personal situation. And that's including things like free night awards and elevated hotel status, elevated tiers, all those things really make that setup as a portfolio a whole setup that is really well used for their individual components.
And speaking of portfolio too, how many credit cards at this point have you applied for? And the reason I asked this to help you answer this question would be, I think you're at a point now where you've applied for enough cards where you're not, looking for a ton of welcome offers anymore. You probably are kind of settling down on that more simplistic, at least core credit card setup approach. Or somebody like myself is still, a little bit earlier on. I do have a lot of cards, but I'm constantly chasing like that next welcome offer. So how many cards have you applied for at this point? And how would you relate this strategy that you implement to somebody like me who's a little bit earlier on and still hunting all those welcome offers?
So that's a very interesting question. Actually, surprisingly, and I didn't really realize this until I looked, I've actually applied for more than 40 credit cards in my life.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's been a lot. Now, I don't have 40 credit cards, right? I actually only have about 20. So I've canceled about half of them, right? But the thing is that at this point, I'm not really necessarily, like you said, looking for just welcome offer after welcome offer. I'm starting to tailor it down so that my portfolio kind of works for me and in my situation. And what I've found to be the most beneficial, like we've talked about earlier, is that my core credit card setup should be really about cash back, because that's the simplest way for me to earn the best value possible. I don't fly a lot in international flights. I should fly more abroad than I should, but I don't, just based off of my, what I do for work and all this other stuff. So I mainly fly domestically, and those cashback things are just fine for that. Having said that, I do stay in a lot of hotels. I do fly very often. So having that elite status with hotels plus some airline benefits can also be helpful for me too. And so that's why I intermix the two, core setup and benefit setup, to make that unique portfolio for myself.
You have a strategy that I definitely look to implement as time goes on. I think the more I realize, what the benefits of a hybrid setup are, the more I want to jump on it quicker. And the reason I say that is because, I talk to people a lot that are trying to maximize their core credit card setup. And I do think in the beginning, it's smart to do get the chase cards earlier on while you're under 524 and do that entire strategy. Get the Capital One cards early before you have too many cards. But at the end of the day, you really can't beat like a very solid cashback setup of earning 5% on most of your earning categories, or in your case, 4.5 to 5% on, or 4 to 5% on literally every purchase.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a pretty insane thing to be able to say you do. And while I really like that hybrid approach, I feel like it's still not something that I've, consciously forced myself into doing. Do you think that's the way that you went about it, or was it more of a natural transition as time went on?
Yeah, I would say it was more of a natural transition. I wasn't looking to have a cashback setup, nor was I looking to have a travel focused setup. I just looked at myself and I was like, what am I working towards at this time? So surprisingly, you may not have known me. I mean, I don't think anyone knew me back in 2021 because I was on YouTube yet, but I actually was running at that time the Amex quadfecta. I had the platinum, I had the gold, I had the green, and I had the blue business plus. And so I was rocking that setup for about a year or so, actually. But what turned me off of that was, it got really overwhelming with the statement credits. It's one thing. But the reason why I ran that setup at that time was because I knew that I was getting engaged soon. I knew I was going to have a honeymoon. And I recently had my honeymoon trip where I redeemed a ton of membership rewards points. And so I had to really build up that stash. And so part of that strategy was to have a core credit card setup that could build up those extra points, even with the welcome offers. And back then, there wasn't family language. So I went platinum, gold, and green, and then blue business plus. And so I got them in the opposite order. But at the same time, that was a different goal for me. And then as I got burned out from membership rewards points and, doing all the statement credits to like make sure the annual fees made sense, and I got more, burned out on the additional things that credit card companies put on you to make that work to get those points back, I realized that having a simple credit card setup would be a great way for me to just kind of hold out for a little bit and kind of reassess. And that's when I stumbled upon hotel credit cards being so beneficial, and the Marriott strategy and all that sort of stuff that we talked about a couple of years ago. And so that's kind of my story in terms of how I transitioned from a points earning setup now to a almost completely cashback setup.
Gotcha. So if somebody was in my position looking to maybe get into a cashback setup at some point, I'm not saying I'm switching right now, but if I wanted to get there at some point, you have the experience now of having cashback cards, at least, sprinkling them in over the past year. What travel credit cards have you paired with those that you found to be the most valuable? Like getting into the specifics here.
Mm-hmm. So if you have a core credit card setup of mainly cashback cards, I always love hotel credit cards as part of your benefit credit card setup. So I call it the secondary setup, but really it's those cards you use mainly for the benefits. And the reason why I like hotel credit cards so much is because of three words: free night rewards, right? There's so many different options from different issuers where you can get those free night rewards, whether it be Hilton, Marriott, IHG, World of Hyatt. Just take your pick, and that's great. Now, some of them have better free night rewards than others. Like Hilton has the best, I would argue. I would say Hyatt probably has the worst on their credit card. But, again, you have to choose the one that would work for you. And the reason why that works well is because it's not dependent on points. Of course, you can top up with points, and that's totally fine. But because you're earning cash back in your core credit card setup, now you have these hotel credit cards that earn free night rewards you can just use based on what's available at the time. What's additionally better to think about too is that you can also buy points, and this is again going a little bit more deeper into things, where you can buy points at 100% sale, namely for Hilton and IHG, if you need to get to a certain level faster. Actually, at the time of the recording of this video, I've been targeted for a 100% IHG points bonus. I think it ends on January 31st. And some of you that are watching may also have that targeted bonus. I think I'm going to not do that right now because I have a lot of IHG points on deck. But if I needed them, that's another option to buy them. So you have them to use for that, fourth night free benefit if you redeem for a hotel stay, or a fifth night free benefit if you're with Hilton, for example. And so you can use these strategies. And if you want to really be really good about this, you could use that cash back that you earn from your cashback cards to buy the points that you can then use for, there's all these combinations you can do. But ultimately, I think the best way to earn points is through welcome offers, not through multipliers and spending. So if you want a certain point currency, whether it be MRs, URs, thank you points, or Capital One miles, just go for the welcome offer and not worry about the spending on your core credit card setup, which is already giving you that very high, hopefully very high, cashback multiplier.
It's so funny. I talked to Luke's Points and Miles recently too. I'm not sure if his video came out before yours or not. And one of the strategies he mentioned is that strategy of buying hotel points whenever you have those big sales come up. Is that something you've already implemented in the past? And I guess, can you walk us through when that makes sense to do versus when it doesn't make sense? Because I think that's something that personally I've not done, and I imagine a lot of the audience considers doing, but hasn't either. So when does that make sense?
Yeah, so there's two schools of thought when it comes to buying hotel points. So the first thought is you just buy it, the entire thing, the max amount for the whole year. And so I think, if I remember correctly, it's 500,000 for Hilton and 400,000 for IHG in a single calendar year. And I might be getting that wrong, but it's kind of around there. So you're looking at $2,000 for IHG and $2,500 for Hilton. And so if you have them around, the thing is, if you ever decide you want to have a vacation that's 5 nights or 4 nights for IHG, 5 nights for Hilton, you can then implement those points to redeem for those nights, getting that night free, and then that will give you that discounted rate on that hotel. So that's one school of thought. The other school of thought is to buy the points when you think you have a redemption to make. And that's the safer route because, as you know, points that sit in your account are worth 0.
Yep.
So you got to use them. You got to put them into play. So that's probably better for someone who's not traveling as frequent as, for example, myself. I know I do a lot of traveling, and so I know I'll use those points eventually throughout the year. And that's why I feel comfortable doing that, because those points I buy that year will be gone by the end of the year. I know that for sure. Now, in this situation where I have this bonus going on now, I'm not buying it right now because I already know I have enough points for me to handle for the rest of my travel for the rest of this year. But if that was different, if I thought that, okay, I have a pending trip coming in the next 12 to 18 months that can be deployed, then I may opt out or opt in to buy those points instead. And so that's kind of what I would say with those points. And you have to choose your battle and choose out of which route you want to take. But there's no right or wrong answer, just the right answer for you.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I think one thing that a lot of people could be struggling with is actually planning out those vacations ahead of time, or doing like a proper credit card roadmap and all of that stuff. And I was going to ask you too about how, whenever you were more on that team travel side of things, were you the kind of person that was trying to earn and burn as much as possible, or were you sitting on those points? Because honestly, I think a lot of people, including myself on team travel, we tend to earn a lot of points. We're doing great. We have the Amex cards. We're getting all these points. but then we just sit on them and we never use them. And it's like, okay, why not just have a cashback set up instead? You could even invest that money in the stock market. You're getting a decent return every year, hopefully by doing that. Like it just seems like that might be a better approach for a lot of people that are more, hoarding tendencies of their points.
Yeah, well, it does go back to the goals of your points, like I mentioned before. As for me personally, I had a very specific goal in mind. And that goal was for me to redeem my points for the best honeymoon that I could. I was dating my now wife for about 9 or 10 years before we got married. And so I knew that eventually we get married and then we would actually have this really big honeymoon. I always wanted to take a honeymoon that had pretty much, the first class seats, the hotels out were pretty much for free, all that jazz. And I know there's going to take a lot of points to get there. And so I did sit on my points when I earned them. I sat on them for maybe 2 to 3 years, but I knew that there was going to be that goal where I was going to redeem them for a huge, huge redemption. And so that's why I sat on them. Now, if I didn't have that goal, then I would be more up to earn and burn. And I'm trying to get much better at this because that hasn't been my MO for the past 3 or 4 years at this point. So now I have to learn how to do a more earn and burn strategy because I'm not good at it. And I do have points that I'm sitting on, not as many as you'd think, but I still have, a couple 100,000 in each point currency that probably could get deployed somewhere. And so I think that's kind of a lot where a lot of people live is in that couple 100,000 point range for each ecosystem. And so trying to get a way to use them in the right way is definitely a challenge. And you have to put in the work to get the right redemption, which is why I think cashback is something that is a little bit more towards what I want to do at this point, because I have those points sitting that are not being deployed. So I clearly don't need any more. So I just need to get some value back immediately. And that's where cashback is huge.
So say you've now convinced somebody to move from that team travel to the team cashback side, or at least planted that seed in their head. I know one big holdup that a lot of people are going to have with US Bank and Bank of America, which I probably should have touched on earlier, is the fact that to actually earn those really high rates, to get that boost on your points, with the Smartly card, for example, and then the Bank of America cards, you need to be holding $100,000 in assets under management with each of those places respectively. So, and I know you made a video about this. What would you say are the best ways to do that? Also, is that something you think that somebody my age should be considering whenever they're starting to invest and trying to figure out where to hold their money? What do you think about that?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things I like to say to people like yourself that are a little bit younger is you want to make sure that you're not majoring in the minors, right? And so we all talk about this credit card game and this credit card situation where we can earn a lot of points. But ultimately, what we all want to do is save money. That's what we want to do, whether it be with the points, whether it be with less spending or what have you. And so if there's a way for you to achieve that goal, that would be great. But another aspect of that is figuring out the other side of that, which is there a way can you to increase the amount of money you make, or basically get a bigger shovel to start saving for that stuff? So the cards that we have with Bank of America and US Bank, they do require a lot of assets, but you have to get those assets to get there. So it may be worthwhile if you are in cashback, instead of spending all that time trying to maneuver through all the different statement credits and maneuver through all the different, flight aggregators, figuring out the best point redemption. Although it is a very cool thing to do and maybe a good side thing to do, maybe that time may be better spent doing something else, like figuring out a way to earn more money or spend less money by budgeting or what have you. So it's all comes together. And if you are on cashback, you've now freed yourself from a lot of that complexity that comes in the credit card game. And so if you free that time, and right now, Spencer, you have so much time. Like I think you're in your young 20s, almost mid 20s at this point.
24, yep.
Yeah. So you have so much time, and I would give anything to have as much time as you right now, because it's just amazing how much you can do. And so for people in your age group, you don't realize the value of that much time because you have so much of it. But as someone in, that maybe towards me, I'm in my late 30s, time is more of a precious resource than I had realized when I was back in my 20s. And so if I could just figure out a way to save more time so I could do more things that mattered to me, and that could be anything. It could be more hobbies, spend time with your family, spend time with your friends, do all those financial things we talked about. That would be what I would recommend trying to focus on now that you're starting on this cashback. And you're still getting a great return, by the way, because you've maximized that cashback setup.
Exactly. I appreciate that perspective a ton. And I think that's a great place to kind of leave this off. Obviously, if y'all have not checked out Stan's channel before, I don't know what you're doing. Go check him out. Everything will be linked down below. Also, I'll link your video to the what's in my wallet video for the first quarter, because that's what kind of prompted this meetup in the first place. But yeah, Stan, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope to, have you on the channel again soon.
Absolutely, Spencer. It's always a pleasure to be talking with you. We've been doing this YouTube thing for a lot of years now, and so it's been great to see you grow and to see kind of what we all can accomplish with the credit card setups, and really just have a nice community to talk about our favorite topic, which is credit cards.
Absolutely, and vice versa. Thanks again, man.
All right, take care.